ahead and get started. We're right on time this morning. So we have the director of the Emergency Management Agency for Hamilton County with us this morning. He's going to present the Emergency Operations Plan. Nick Crosley, thank you for being here, and we're looking forward to your presentation. Oh, let's introduce ourselves on the dais first.
Leslie Hervey, Clerk to the Board.
Hamilton County Commissioner Alicia Reese.
Jeff Aludo, County Administrator.
Patrick Dressing, Assistant Prosecuting Attorney.
I'm Commissioner Denise Driehaus. Welcome, Nick. The floor is yours.
Thank you. Nick Crossley. I'm the Director of Hamilton County Emergency Management Homeland Security Agency. So today I'm here to present an update of the county's emergency operations plan. So we were required by the Ohio Revised Code at the county level to have an emergency operations plan. This is the third time I've been in front of this group asking for an approval of our update. So it's a living document that we promulgate every 5 years, but we update it with minor updates through every year. So there could be an administration change, there could be, we change elected officials, we reorg departments, whatever it might be that makes us do small changes. And then every 5 years, about 3.5 years in, we start a complete review with every county and outside agency that's part of our disaster response system so that we have enough time. We spend 1.5 years going piece by piece through all the basic plan and the 15 emergency support functions to make sure that everybody is in agreement with how they will help the county's residents in case of a disaster. And so the view behind that is obviously you have an emergency management agency. We coordinate and facilitate, and we maintain our expertise in the emergency management field. But I like to say it's a sort of a whole village response, so to speak, when it's all hands on deck when it comes to a disaster, especially with county personnel, both from our from Board of County Commissioner departments as well as our independent electives. We also link with the private sector. Duke Energy is a prime example. We have a Hamilton County COAD, which is a coalition of community organizations active in disasters that we've recently started. So we have probably close to 75 or 100 community agencies that have offered to be part of our COAD and help in a disaster response. So again, we're trying to get that government, for-profit, nonprofit, so that if we have a major disaster, that we have a broad swath of resources, because government in and of itself is not set up to manage and complete total community recovery on its own. So it really takes all of us to be able to respond. So this plan helps us outline everybody's roles and responsibilities. So that being said, second slide. I don't know how you guys. Okay. There we go. Oh, I had the clicker. Thank you. Sorry. Haven't been here in a while. So as I've said, the Emergency Operations Plan is a document that outlines how Hamilton County will respond to large-scale emergency or disaster. It also helps outline, for your information, how we coordinate with the state and federal government in case of a large disaster. I will note that most disasters, while a disaster at the local level rarely reaches the state criteria for a disaster, or especially the federal criteria for disaster. So I think there's some misunderstanding that every disaster is a federal disaster, and actually that's probably less than 10%, if not 5%. They're just the really big disasters, the California wildfires, the hurricanes in the southern United States, those kinds of things. So most things, we at the local level handle those disasters on our own, at our own cost. The purpose of it, like I said, is to outline county-wide response, short-term recovery coordination efforts, define disaster-specific roles and responsibilities, and then we facilitate multi-agency and multi-jurisdictional coordination. So my conversations with all of our 49 communities is that regardless of your level of staffing or how you're managed, we encourage them all to have a basic understanding of how they would handle a disaster in their community, and then we can then help them. So they are the best, the local elected officials and the appointed officials are the best ones to know their community, and then we are there to help them recover from the disaster. So we do encourage all of our communities to have emergency operations plans as well. Probably, if you've seen ours, it's probably about 1.5 inches, 2 inches thick. Theirs wouldn't be as complicated as ours would be. So how is it organized? So we have a basic plan. So some of this stuff, it's just great information to understand. So when you're in emergency management, you have a job to know your community and to know who is in your community, everything from the economic drivers to the major employers to as much as we can about all the residents that live in Hamilton County. And so we constantly are reviewing that and understanding that. So when we're recruiting partners, when we're developing our plans and procedures, that we're understanding the different communities that we have to work with. We understand how each of our townships, villages, and cities operate so that we know how we can integrate into their systems. It's an overview of the 21 hazards we have in Hamilton County. So that's everything from landslides to terrorism to high wind events, tornadoes, snowstorms, ice storms, anything like that. So we have 21 hazards. And then it provides the organization and assignment of responsibility. So again, we partner with everybody from the county engineer to our communications center to the environmental department to Duke Energy. So the whole range of people. And the second part is the emergency support functions. So in the United States, we've identified pretty consistently there are 15 areas of support functions that are generally needed in most large-scale disasters. We have 15 of those identified. And then we have one hazard-specific annex, and that's for hazardous materials response. We're required separately by the state of Ohio to have a hazmat response plan at the county level. We provide sort of the high-level support and most of the training that our hazmat techs receive in Hamilton County. That part of the plan is not available for public distribution due to the sensitive information, so it's exempted by Ohio Sunshine Law. So again, the concept of operations addresses the prevention activities that we do, the actions we take to support pre-planned events. So lots of pre-planned events in Hamilton County. So obviously a lot of people think about the ones that happen within the borders of Cincinnati, but we have large events in many of our communities, from Whitewater Township to Blue Ash to Sycamore. So they're all over the place. So we, throughout the year, keep an eye on all the large-scale events that are happening in the county. The responsibilities of our local jurisdictions. So again, as a separate elected body, I believe you do have a responsibility to be prepared for disasters. If nothing else, who's in charge and how to ask for help. And then understanding your community so that we can integrate into your community and provide that assistance as it's available. We use the National Incident Management System, or the Incident Command System, to manage our resources. We have a process for activating the Hamilton County Emergency Operations Center. And then the emergency declaration process, which I work with Administrator Ludo on, who then comes to the board for a disaster declaration. And I think everybody here has been through the declaration process a couple of times at this point. So who has responsibilities listed in the EOP? So again, the 49 jurisdictions within Hamilton County have responsibilities. Local and county elected officials. So again, we make an effort. We have many elected officials in Hamilton County. It's a unique both challenge and opportunity compared to a lot of my counterparts around the country. Ohio is unique in that. I think Franklin has 50-something, and then Cuyahoga goes even a few more. So it's very complicated. We identify the EOC command and general staff, and then we have the coordinating support agencies. So they used to call them lead agencies. That made people nervous, so they thought they were being in charge is a bit nerve-wracking. We realized that responding to a disaster, we keep an eye on it every day, but a lot of our support agencies and departments do not. So I always explain to them the way we assign tasks in a disaster is basically your job, but on steroids. So it has to be quicker, it has to be faster, and it has to be more effective in a disaster. And so we work with these 11 coordinated agencies. We have the Comm Center, the Conservation District, our office, the Engineer's Office, Environmental Services, the Fire Chiefs Association. So there's a group of, there's an association for the fire chiefs and police chiefs in Hamilton County. Job and Family Services is an outstanding partner. LAPC handles, Local Emergency Planning Committee handles a lot of our hazmat response or coordination. Hamilton County Public Health, and also Cincinnati Public Health, and Norwood and Springdale. The Sheriff's Office, law enforcement, obviously a huge partner. We have, I think, 40-something police departments, so we work with the sheriff, who then helps us coordinate the local police. And then the Hamilton County Urban Search and Rescue Unit, which is a Type 1 urban search and rescue unit that is one of the top teams, and I think there may be 3 or 4 in the state. So in Columbus, FEMA has a USAR team that they fund through the Columbus Fire Department, and then we have a department that's supported by all of our fire departments in Hamilton County, as well as members from our neighboring jurisdictions in Ohio. But that's a fabulous resource, and they have everything from heavy rescue to drone operations that they can use. They use them a lot. When we had the missing endangered adult up in around Springfield Township a couple weeks ago. They used their infrared technology to fly the drone and try to find, because it was also midnight. So they found every deer that was hiding up in Springfield Township. That was an interesting event. So you can see, again, it's everybody. It's all hands on deck in a disaster response when we write the EOP. This is how it's structured, and this is who we've asked to coordinate these events. So you have, obviously, the engineer's office. Engineer Eric Beck is just a fabulous partner with us, always gets us to yes every time we ask for help. We have the Hamilton County Communications Center, Environmental Services. And when we say Public Works, again, this is a department with some expertise in this area, and then they coordinate with the people with the other expertise. But what we're trying to do is work with county agencies. So because at the end of the day, I tell everybody, when it comes to helping our communities or helping the county internally, everything ends up on the in front of the board, whether you're independent, elected, or appointed. And so we work with everybody. Job and Family Services, fabulous partner. Again, when I first came here 10 years ago, a couple of days ago, we talked about how to take care of people, who is really the biggest agency that helps take care of people. And then they have other disaster resources. Resource management. So as you know, we now have a public safety warehouse. We have quite a few disaster response supplies. And so we manage those resources so we can respond to the community. Public health and healthcare systems. So we work with Commissioner Kesterman at the Hamilton County Public Health to coordinate that function. And we work closely with their emergency preparedness function that they have under public health. Search and rescue, again, we work closely with Hamilton County USAR. Hazardous materials, that's the plan and the procedure. So the procedure is in the EOP, just not the plan. And that's coordinated by my local emergency planning committee, and that's within emergency management. We work with the Conservation District on animals and agriculture. So recently, a few months ago, we had an ag issue. I did call the director of the Conservation District and asked her about it. She promptly stated, "We don't do that." And I said, "Well, that's okay. You have ag in your name. I need you to call somebody." And she did. And we got the contact we needed to be able to resolve that. And that's sort of the way my mind works, and so that's the way I encourage other people's minds to work. Energy, that's really the engineer's office, just coordinate with Duke Energy and any other energy providers in the county. Sheriff's office works with us to coordinate law enforcement. You saw that during the styrene event. They were just right there with us throughout the entire event. Critical infrastructure is a new one. We used to have recovery. That used to be disaster recovery. Hamilton County, again, we're a nationally accredited program underneath the board, and recovery used to be an ESF. We now have a recovery framework, so we help identify many partners. So we're looking at economic recovery, community recovery, all of that, how we would work with the local community to help them do, especially long-term recovery. Because as you see in California, you're starting to see the issues. I won't say that's going to be painful. It's going to be really painful for that long-term recovery for those communities that have been decimated by those fires. But it's the same things going on. You tend to forget when you got the wildfires, the same things currently going on in Florida and the other states that were impacted by the hurricanes. And then emergency public information. So this proves to be, communicating with the public. We also sort of throw in there communicating internally as well. So we have a job to inform our employees of what's going on, to work with our local communities and inform those elected and appointed leaders. But then really it's getting that message out to the public. And so Emergency Public ESF 15, we work with the manager's office and Bridget Doherty to help coordinate that function. Again, gathering the information you need, digesting it so people can understand it. And we did that a lot during the styrene event. So we did two things during styrene. One, we took the advice and guidance of Hamilton County Public Health and EPA. We then distilled that so that we could send out concise information for the public. But then we also, on our website, we have an emergency page, and we created it immediately and posted every piece of information that we got, every single air monitoring report, every single water report, everything we were doing, right? Which I think, so I'm a big proponent. I mean, we talk about transparency all the time. However, there's very little we do that is not public. And so especially in my realm, we're not the feds. We don't have a lot of top secret stuff. And immediately when that event started happening, myself and my staff, we really felt like it was important to post all that. And I think it surprised a lot of people that we were, now I couldn't read them to save my life until I got to the number 0, and then okay, no exposure, right? That's what I was looking for. But I think it allowed anybody helping the communities, anybody helping the residents could also get the reports and download those. So we wanted to make that's important. So we also found out during COVID, so it was real hard for people to digest information during COVID. So we had a really robust group working with PIOs from both public and private, and we worked with a lot of the schools, again, pushing that information out, and that had never happened before. So it's really, public information is just, it's invaluable to make sure we're communicating with the public, especially when they're going through some of their most stressful times. So what are the biggest updates? So again, it's a living document, but every 5 years we do a deep dive with all of our partners. It's a better definition of risk and vulnerability to ensure that we're focusing on, obviously, the people most at risk. So economic, social, and economic, language barriers, any kind of mobility barriers. We need to make sure that we're working with every entity that can help people. So for example, if we need support, disability support, we go with Hamilton County Disability Support Agency. I can't remember, I'm blanking. We work real closely with them. If we need mental health, we go to the Mental Health Board. But we need to know who's in our community so that we can provide those resources. So we've identified those, and that's outlined in our plan. Increase use of the community lifelines to more easily identify and communicate incident impacts. So several years ago, about 5, 6, 7 years ago, FEMA came out with sort of a graphic-based descriptor, so you could understand, here's the logo for water, so you could understand the impact of water systems, and then we could put that in there. So it's a much clearer, I'm sure you've seen it on our situation reports we put out. So you can go right to it and say what's been impacted, housing, the economy, anything that's been impacted. So we have a national disaster response system in the United States, federally supported, state managed, locally executed. And I do state managed with kind of a loose thing in there. No, I'm kidding. And so we want to make sure that we're tying in with what is the best guidance from both the federal, mainly the federal government and their core capabilities to demonstrate how we're meeting, especially the requirements of all our grants. We have many Homeland Security grants as well as our Emergency Management Performance Grant. So we don't have to go looking for that. We've already integrated that into our plannings and procedures. And then, of course, the complete overhaul of ESF 14, critical infrastructure to better align with DHS's 16 critical infrastructure sectors. So that's communications, that's water, that's transportation. So if there's somebody out there that we haven't included, especially in critical infrastructure, which is a much used term these days, that at the county level we have contacts, and either that or we have contacts who have contacts. So for example, we work with Ready Cincinnati, we work with Alloy, any kind of group, the Chambers of Commerce's, and then of course obviously a lot of our major critical infrastructure partners, CISA, which is the cyber unit for the feds. So again, trying to integrate all of those on a regular basis. So we provided a comprehensive and unified effort to revise the county suite of emergency plans. So just as a reminder, we have a damage assessment plan. So damage assessment is a responsibility of both county government to assist. So most of Hamilton County is incorporated into somewhere, unlike having an unincorporated part like a lot of counties in the U.S. or where I've worked. And so we have a damage assessment plan to assist the communities with their damage assessment. And then we provide training on an ongoing basis all year long, and we go out to the community and provide community level training on how to do the damage assessment for major disasters. We have a debris management plan. So again, if you just go back to the Mother's Day tornado in Montgomery, at our last, the meeting before last, we, with our partners in preparedness, we had somebody come in and talk about what happened in Montgomery County. If you haven't seen a 4-story tall pile of debris, half a mile long, then you've not lived. And so working with the engineer and others, we've identified if we have to, sort of, you had Ike again or something like that, we want to, what we're trying to do is while each community is responsible for their own debris, how can we coordinate that at the county level so that hopefully it makes it a more streamlined process to collect and catalog that damage. And a lot of that, to be quite honest, so to get a state declaration, you have to meet the same requirements as if you were trying to get a federal declaration. So in Hamilton County, that's, I believe, about $4 million in uninsured losses, which surprisingly enough, based on what they consider insurables, for example, basements are not taken into consideration by FEMA. It's pretty hard to get to $4 million and to be able to document those losses. And so when you have a lot of tree damage during Ike, well, debris is expensive, so you can get there pretty quickly. But for example, with the floods of 16, where we felt like we had a lot of damage, which we did, a lot of it did not qualify for the criteria. But the state uses that same criteria, and then they have a state disaster response fund. So if you don't get to the state level, which I believe is about maybe 12 or 13 million at this point, then we can request a declaration from the governor, and the governor can then go, some states pre-populate their disaster fund, Ohio does not. They go to the control board, I think is the phrase, and they ask for the money to help. And then if we get a federal, then we start working with FEMA. So that's how that system works. But we want to be able to, because of both those things, you need to be able to track your debris. You have to separate your debris. Again, if you just watch California, we have to be able to do all that. We have a donations management plan. So again, through the Public Safety Warehouse, allows us to have a central point of reception and distribution for commodities. But then also, again, looking at recent current disasters, lots of stuff has been donated. If you look at the flooding in Tennessee, and they set up the raceway to receive lots of interesting donations, we need to have a plan for how we're going to manage that and who we're going to work with. We work real closely with Salvation Army and others to help manage that. The Joint Information System, again, it's to, during a disaster, I believe it's critical for us to work with our partners on what it is we're telling the public, because we all need to be on the same page. So I realize everybody, all of our communities have their own elected officials, but if we can all be talking the same language as we're sharing information with the public, I think it would really help cut down on any confusion or any other feelings that might come out of it. So we have a system for that in place. The Fire Chiefs Association maintains a mass casualty plan, so that's persons that are injured and how we're going to respond to that, get enough ambulances, all that kind of stuff. The mass fatality plan, we work with the coroner's office. So with the plane crash in Washington, D.C., they activated their mass fatality plan. And you saw they opened up a family assistance center to start helping relatives. They opened up a phone line, all that kind of stuff. And so if we have something, God forbid, a man-made event or any kind of transportation incident here in Hamilton County, for example, if we had a plane take off from CBG and crash in Hamilton County, we have had a couple of small ones, luckily 2 or 3 seaters, but if we had the big ones, such as DC, then we would work with the coroner's office to open a family assistance center. And that's sort of, it's a place to get away from the media. It's a place we can set up counseling. Whatever victims' families may need, we can set it up in that area. So we've worked closely with the coroner's office on that plan. Spontaneous volunteer management plan, so everybody wants to volunteer post-disaster. So my goal is to take those volunteers and hand them to nonprofits that are responding. We are not staffed to manage huge volunteer outreach. So we have a volunteer management plan. And then, of course, we have practiced and we maintain a disaster recovery framework so that within reason, as soon as we can after a disaster starts, which is probably less than a week, we are talking about what does recovery look like short and long term. And in our case, we'd be working, a lot of county agencies work across all the boundaries in Hamilton County, and then they have connections to the state and the feds. We try to coordinate that to assist the local leaders. In Ryan's head, so Ryan McEwen is our Assistant Director, Head of Planning. This is the most comprehensive EOP update in the agency's history, and I would agree with him on that. We've had lots of changes. A decade into my tenure, and Ryan and Morgan have both been with me about the same amount of time, my 2 assistant directors. We've learned a lot about how Hamilton County operates, the changing landscape of disaster response and recovery. And so we take a lot of that education, a lot of that knowledge, and we put it into this plan. And then it also helps us really solidify our relationships with our partners. We had over 4 dozen planning meetings with over 80 partner agencies over a 4-year period. It really got hot and heavy about the last 18 months. And then, again, I think my point to the public always is, it's called a disaster for a reason, right? There is no perfect disaster response. However, are you as prepared as possible? Have you attempted to identify who is in your community? What might their needs be? For example, one of the most challenging, and again, you'll see it in every disaster, is post-disaster housing, right? So we work with everybody from CMHA, Cincinnati Metropolitan Housing Authority, to the Builders Association, right? And we work a lot through organizations that then partner with them, right? Because it's going to be a huge, if you ever get the big ones, it's going to be a huge plan on how those neighborhoods recover. But you've always got the short-term housing issue. And at that level, you tend to get to the FEMA level where they're providing assistance. But what if they're not? And then what do we do, right? Then we work with the state on that issue. So we're just trying to demonstrate to the residents of Hamilton County that we work every day to build a robust, comprehensive system that addresses the needs in Hamilton County. So I always say, for example, we don't plan for hurricanes, but we plan for the wind from hurricanes, right? And we actually have history of that. We don't plan for tsunamis, but we plan for a wind type event that some might consider tsunami level. So we work hard, and that we have a hazard mitigation plan that's countywide that's updated every 5 years as well. And we hit those targets every single time. And with that, that is the emergency operations plan, and I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you. A very comprehensive report as usual. Nick, thank you to you and your team, who I know are your support staff that make all this happen. So a couple of things occur to me as you talk about the work that you do, the work that no one else really wants to think about because it's only relevant as we have big disaster events or critical events. And so these relationships that you refer to, I know, are really important to the work that you do, because without the relationships, you can't manage this agency in the way that you have. So I want to commend you for, I saw the number, about 80 meetings with not only government agencies, but all the nonprofits and everybody that's in the space. So I know that takes a lot of work and effort, and so I applaud you for that. And your proactive approach. I have never seen someone so proactive related to emergency management. Your enthusiasm for the work is impressive and is a huge benefit, really, to the county. So I want to thank you for that, too. Couple of things. So as we think about investments of the county and the floods that you referred to in Norwood and other neighborhoods, we have allocated some of our ARPA money to do some prevention work related to flooding in those neighborhoods. And so as we think about those kinds of investments in different categories and different agencies throughout the county, what are your thoughts related to your participating in those conversations so that we can make more strategic investments?
So I think, we do participate. MSD just started a new group, and I apologize, I don't remember the exact name of it. We work closely with MSD. We work closely with our water providers. We work closely with all those infrastructure. So the flood in 16, as you know, the stormwater system was overwhelmed. And I know that's a constant evolution. I watch those meetings. And so I think as that system improves, you'll see that. We also work with them when we develop the hazard mitigation plan. There are grant funds available. So Hamilton County, especially MSD, has used hazard mitigation grant funds to, for example, work on the Muddy Creek issue and buy out those homes along there. So they've done a lot with those grants. So not only are they always on the lookout for grants to help them with their work, but we're constantly on the lookout for opportunities for them to apply for grants for their work. So, for example, we work with them on the BRIC program, Building Resilient Infrastructure in Communities, so they can apply for those funds. So we identify what their needs are. We identify what the hazards are. We help them identify or work with them to identify how would you mitigate the impacts of these events. And then what is the possible funding? So I think my goal always is to build upon the funding of the county and the taxpayers with hopefully federal grants and programs that come out, and state grants and programs. And so that's how we've integrated with a lot of those infrastructure projects.
Just for context sake, are a lot of the grants that you're referring to federal grants?
Yes.
Okay. We've got some interesting dynamics right now at the federal government. So every time we think about the impacts of what's going on, I do want to make sure that people understand that these federal grants are scattered throughout our organization, including emergency management. And then one last thing, you mentioned in your partnerships, the coordinating and supporting agencies, you've got JFS listed as one of the many partners. Some of them are more obvious, I think. And you talked a little bit about this, the families that might be in need if there were to be a disaster or some kind of emergency. Can you elaborate on that a little bit and what the role of JFS is in emergency situations? So
JFS obviously has their usual programs that people may or may not know about, that they can, in working with Michael Patton, what Michael generally does is, what's the issue? What programs do we currently have? And in a disaster, oftentimes, those programs are expanded by the state so that they can get more funds out. So, for example, disaster unemployment compensation or expanded food programs, things like that. And so that's oftentimes from the state to JFS is coordinated through them. And so basically, I just hand him the problem, and and then he starts looking across his suite of programs. But also, the great thing about working with GFS, it's not only just the funding that's available, but the incredible amount of partnerships and other programs that they know about, both in the county that provide assistance to residents, but also in the state and the federal government. And so, again, that's sort of our point. That's why we partner with these other agencies. I did that a lot during the pandemic. So one thing that, you speak of relationships, it saved me because I probably didn't see anybody for about a year and a half. And we had those relationships pre-event. And then what I would do is I would call JFS at the time and say, here's the problem. Can you help us deal with it? And then they would go, and then they just basically, it's a prime example of taking the program they usually have and putting it on steroids. And so because of their vast knowledge and especially their understanding also of who's in the community. So again, disasters, take myself, for example. I have homeowners insurance. I have different kinds of insurance. I'm going to figure it out, right, if my home is impacted by a disaster. But we have lots of residents who are not in the same place. And so JFS has this great sort of eye in the sky and understanding, maybe not down to the individual, but at least the dynamics we may need to start thinking about as quickly as possible, whether it's housing, whether it's financial support, child care, whatever it might, employment assistance. And so even if they don't cover that program, they usually know the agencies are individuals who do. And so we use those linkages. And so it just keeps going down like that.
You just have so many reminders of where you have stepped in related to COVID, related to flooding, related to the styrene leak. I mean, it is really good for us to know that you are there in those situations and you have already created all the partnerships that are going to make the response to those situations work. So thank you for everything that you do. Commissioner Summer-Odumas?
Thank you so much. Thank you, Nick, for your great work and your staff. They really have a passion about it, and so that's great. And thanks for your update. Just one question as it relates to partners. The diversity of language in Hamilton County. Who do you partner with specifically? Is it the Red Cross to help with that?
So two things. One, I can send you the list of COAD, but yes, we have multiple languages, agencies and nonprofits who deal with the different populations in Hamilton County. And I can send you that list. We also have a contract service to make sure that we can communicate in any language. So public health, we sort of piggybacked off their contract. So we have that MOU in place. And then based on feedback actually during the pandemic of the major languages, on our website, you'll find Nepali, you'll find French, you'll find Arabic, you'll find Spanish, English, I think another one, that according to our research were the most prevalent languages. And they asked us, well, we had to explain outdoor warning sirens, because believe it or not, if you don't know what an outdoor warning siren is and it starts going off next to your head, it can really scare you. And so they asked us, can you explain that in a one-pager? And so we have it for download, and we emailed it out to a lot of organizations so they could share it with both current residents and any residents moving into the county. So again, even something as simple as that. So I'm very cognizant of translation services, sign language, whatever it is, to make sure that we can communicate as effectively as possible.
Thank you. That's all I have.
Thank you. Commissioner Reese?
Thank you. Thank you, Nick. I always say we stay ready so we don't have to get ready. I think that is the message. And we have been tried in different capacities, as was mentioned before, with COVID and, school shooting. It wasn't a shooting, but we thought it might be. Thank God it wasn't. All of the different things, the train, all these things. And one of the things I want to commend is the communication system, because the first thing people want is communication. And a lot of times it could be 5 or 6 different messages or misinformation getting out. And I think under your leadership of this collaboration and coordination of everyone, we have kind of a protocol on the communication. The other thing is, as commissioners, which people may or may not know, we are, first of all, your committee is in state law. So that's one of the committees that we have to be on, because it is saying this is one of the missions of the county commission. But getting us information quickly before we see it on the news or read it in a newspaper. And you have a protocol system where you're able to get that to the administrator, and administrator gets it to us right away. It doesn't matter if it's 3 in the morning, 2 in the morning, 5 in the morning. I mean, we are like doctors on call 24/7 because you never know when something may happen. So I do appreciate that. The other thing you deal with is weather, the weather condition situation. And I think it has been very good because there's a lot of people that are involved in that. If it's going to be a level 1, 2, or 3, obviously that's up to the sheriff's office, and the sheriff is independently elected. So the sheriff is not like City Hall. City Hall, the manager and the council and the mayor, the police chief works for them. We have independent elected office of the sheriff's office. So even though it's an independent office, the way we've worked together, where her team and her office works with you, and you're able to get the message to the administrator, and then he's able to get it to us. So it's one Hamilton County on one accord. That has just been remarkable, and I don't want to take that lightly. We have it, and sometimes we have stuff and we say, oh man, everybody has this. Everybody doesn't have this. It takes a lot of planning and meeting and getting all this stuff ready before we have a situation. The other thing that I wanted to highlight was, in addition to that, I wanted to talk about the training. And one of the things I have been focused on, we started it with COVID, but really getting these trainings out, a module that churches and nonprofits and sororities and fraternities, and I think people are more, I think they're more open to it now because they're seeing all these different things happening, and then making sure that we increase people going to sign up for the alerts. Be aware of the alerts. And like I said, you've been screaming from the rooftops on it, but sometimes people think, it doesn't have anything to do with me right now. And I've got so many other things I'm dealing with. But now I think they're open to it, considering all the different things that are happening. We're having, snow is happening in Houston, Texas, Atlanta, Georgia. They didn't even know how to go get some salt. They went to try to go to Kroger's and get some salt and put down. They've never dealt with a salt truck or anything like that, because that's how things are changing. And then, of course, the wildfires in California, Southern California, and it doesn't matter your income when they come in and take your whole house is gone. Your memories that can never be replaced. We've had things hit. What happened in Trotwood? Went to bed one day and woke up. Whoo!
Yeah.
And I actually went out there. I have a radio show, and I went on the ground and talked to people, and it was devastating. Where do you go from here? So all those things, I just wanted to compliment you on keeping us on point and keeping us moving forward. I did have a question that I want to put out there, and it may not be directed at you, but I wanted us to be looking at it. One of the issues, though, is insurance. And I think you did a workshop on insurance. I know it was at one of the meetings that you talked about that. I think we need to get back to that again, because people have homes, and I want to know, has the trend changed with insurance companies? I was hearing they were canceling people's insurance in Southern California, the fire part of it. They tell you to get a certain insurance, but you didn't have it. I think we need to find out what is the climate, because when you have these disasters, people say, well, I got insurance, and the insurance come back and say, no, you didn't have it. Do we see a trend of insurance companies not providing for some of these disasters, because it's hitting their pockets pretty hard?
So our threat level in Ohio, especially in Hamilton County, for your general insurance, so your fire, your wind, things like that, no, we haven't seen any trend like that. But actually, in response to some concerns from the recent activity with the executive orders that have come out, there's been talk about changing the subsidy for flood insurance. So actually, in response to that query, I'm pulling together some numbers. So historically, across the United States, this many people have flood insurance, and these are the properties at risk. So just some general pull numbers out of a mapping application numbers. We have about 500 policies in effect in Hamilton County for 500 properties. We have 10,000 properties at risk. And so part of that is an education piece. And so after pulling that data, I was looking at working with possibly MSD or some of the other infrastructure providers to say, is there a way just to remind people that this insurance is available and you should consider getting it? So what I think our biggest risk is flooding because it is so underinsured or uninsured. And if you saw water was flowing through Mount Lookout Square, if you saw the water flowing through I'd never seen that before and or never heard of it even. We had water come up into Riverside and went 2 blocks in and was flooding basements and things like that. And so I think, again, it's working with our communities to remind people, hey, you're in a flood zone. And if you don't have flood insurance, you should consider getting flood insurance. And so I think there might be an opportunity this year to possibly work with the insurance industry in Hamilton County, along with some of our critical infrastructure, to say, how do we remind the public to review their risk? But as far as general insurance, I don't think there's any huge issue. The challenge with general insurance is oftentimes the cost. But I tell people, regardless of socioeconomic status, there is no government fix that rebuilds your house. And so I do promote renter's insurance. So it was, I haven't had renters in about 5 years, but it was, you can get it for $11 a month 5 years ago. It's $11 a month now to provide some basic insurance if you get displaced from your rental. And then homeowners insurance is critical. But we all know there's lots of houses in Hamilton County that have been passed down from generation to generation, and they may or may not be carrying homeowners insurance anymore. And so, but I think it's our job to continue to remind people, here's what government can do, here's what government can't do, here are the programs available, and we really encourage you to consider to seeing how you can get some kind of basic level of insurance. So I do promote that to anybody, and I just think it's important to remind them.
Yeah, absolutely. And like I said, I was reading a lot about insurance being canceled, and I've had too many floods. And with the insurance, there's a cap.
Yeah.
I remember the person coming in, you have to show him everything. He's like, forget it, because he knew that like the damage was way worse than what they were going to pay. Mm-hmm. So I do think keeping our eye on that, because unfortunately, more disasters are popping up. And for the insurance companies, we saw that with the wildfires. They were canceling. So just want to keep that as part of, like you said, our trainings that we say to get ready, stay ready, so we don't have to get ready, but the insurance part. The other thing is we've got the new facility coming up, EMA and 911. And there was, this might be a question for Mr. Ludo, I'm not sure. And there was a question of, obviously we got this report that grants were being held. And I have asked for, and I think we're going to get it, having us to have a spreadsheet of everything we have at the county that has federal money, and then every project we have that might not have federal money. So just in case anything pops back up, we at least have a knowledge and are able to go to the spreadsheet. But this is one of the projects that would have some federal money, and what I would say is, though they have rescinded it for now, we need to be running 100 miles an hour. And I don't know, do we have, Anson educated me quickly about from being, it's been voted that you can get it, and then there's another piece of the actual letter, and then there's another piece on the direct deposit. So I'm trying to figure out, where are we on this project? Do we have, I know they said we would get it, but do we have binding and writing, and then do we have a timeline that we can get them our direct deposit numbers so that we could get the money before they wake up and try to do something different?
So I think the one grant that affects the 111 Tri-County building is you have a DOJ grant through the Comm Center, but I think that's already been drawn down. So we do have a $1 million grant for the Emergency Operations Center. So obviously, I work through the National Association of Counties and our National Emergency Managers Association, so I'm following all of that. And so as of right now, I had to do an environmental review. It's up for review by FEMA Region 5. The grant portal is open. And so I think from an emergency management perspective, based on the criteria I've heard of concern from the White House, they shouldn't intersect. So it's pretty clear. We're just building an emergency operations center, you know? So I don't anticipate an impact. So that grant, and also when in the federal language, that grant has been awarded. So it's not in process. It is ours. And so there's been definitive language that once a grant has been awarded, that it can't be rescinded for something like that. So and right now it's all open, it's all flowing. I don't at this time anticipate any issue with the EOC grant. And I think the rest of it was either county supported funds.
So we have no, and that's on the construction side of it?
Well, it's paying for equipment that goes into the EOC. The construction side was county funded, which makes it a lot less complicated if you're dealing with federal money. If you're not turning dirt, life gets a lot easier with federal money. So we should be okay. That's the first thing I asked. So the first thing I started quizzing my contacts about.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Dumas, do you have another
Just a
question?
comment, Nick, as soon as you know the date for our special meeting, if you could let me know, because my schedule is filling up.
You got it. Yep.
That's all.
Can I ask one last thing? You mentioned an ag incident during your comments.
Remember there was a
What is an ag incident? What does that mean?
it was during the styrene event. So there was some farms out toward that area, and there was concerns about soil and ag and
Oh, I
things
see.
like that.
Okay.
And so the conservation district the director helped me connect with Ohio Ag, who then was able to provide both direct contact to the people who were concerned, as well as the questions they had. So it's about contamination.
Yeah, man, you're all over
there
the
wasn't
map.
any.
It's good to have you at the helm, Nick. All right, well, thank you so much for coming in. We appreciate the annual visit. Yeah, Administrator?
So I just wanted to use the opportunity to thank Nick. The board brought up a lot of the specific things, but all the work that his department does, you guys all referenced the various things from COVID to the styrene leak to weather, even going back a couple, earlier this year, while it was not a, quote, disaster by regional standards, the snow event that we had here, the county had to respond to that as if it were, a mini disaster organizationally. We still had to, everything that comes with it, prediction, response, recovery, figuring out how it implicates all of our policies and procedures. Nick is a trusted confidant with all of that. He's one of my primary points of contact when all of that's going on. And even more so than that, he and his team came in a couple weeks ago. We sat down with all the administrative contacts at the county. Nick and Morgan and others in his office led us through an exercise where we basically were recapping what happened and making sure that we were putting improvements in place so that the next time this does happen, we know it will. It's just a question of what it looks like, that we're better prepared to do that or to go through it. So I just wanted to thank Nick for that. I do have a quick question for him, but before I ask the question, I do want to note, just in case I forget, that I think it was 10 years ago on the 2nd of February, so 2 days ago, that the county EMA Homeland Security Office hired Mr. Nick Crosley. So his 10-year work anniversary has just been hit. So I want to congratulate Nick on that. But it's a quick question before I let you off that easy. As we're going through all the emergency operations planning, and you mentioned it in your comments earlier, sirens. I know this is a complicated issue, but just wanted to get your perspective on sirens as we move forward. We have a siren network, facilities helps maintain them, but it is a network of not always the most reliable infrastructure, both from a physical perspective as well as just people. Sometimes when people hear it, they don't know exactly quite what it means. And we put that network in place before these things were around in everybody's hands. So I just wanted to get your perspective on what the future might hold as it relates to emergency management warning, as it relates to sirens versus phones, that type of thing.
So the outdoor warning siren system is 1950s technology that was built back when homes weren't LEED certified, that people weren't driving around in their cars with the stereo turned all the way up, that you weren't in office buildings where you couldn't hear them. And so I think, so obviously it's a policy decision, what we're doing. So I think a lot of communities, or not a lot, but many communities are replacing them with the cell phone notification. That being said, for certain large venues, certain large outdoor venues, there could be a use for them. I think it's also incumbent about all of these outdoor providers, whether it's a group of soccer fields out in Newtown, or are operated by the Parks District, or Paycor. They should have an alert system, and so that they can then notify the people playing there rather than just a siren, which doesn't really tell you anything. To that end, though, we are the infrastructure itself ages quickly. And so we are working with the facilities department to do a complete end-to-end evaluation of the current age of the system, the condition of the system, down to the individual siren, so that what I want to do is make better data-informed decisions, compare that to the locations, because what we've seen a lot lately is we've seen sort of after-dark events. And I don't know about you, maybe you're a lighter sleeper than I am, and I've got one pretty near my house in East Walnut Hills. They're very hard to hear, if you hear them at all. And so really not effective, but your phone going off is effective, right? Or NOAA weather radios or any number of other things that are much more effective. And the great thing about a cell phone notification is it's down to your area. So here's the polygon, here's where you're at with your phone, probably. And so you know you're under that threat. When you hear a siren, our sirens go off by zones. It could be anywhere near you. So we had an event several years ago that went across northern Kentucky, but touched, I believe it's zone 1, which includes downtown. So if it touches it, we activate the zone. And of course, it went off for downtown. They all went to the window and looked out, which is not what I instruct them to do or tell the public. But and so it's just not a very modern, precise system. And so I think as the system not only increases in expense, which is always a consideration, but just is not as useful as it used to be. I think that goes in part of the conversation. And then I think eventually taking all this data and any proposal we might have and have a conversation with the public about what is it the public thinks we should have, and working with the board's office to engage the public in that conversation. So I think their time is limited. However, we do have 195 of them. And it's to the point where we have 4 staff trained to maintain them. We've had to purchase a lot of infrastructure to be able to take care of them, and so we continue to do that. We literally have a system that talks to them every single day, so we know down to the minute. Now we don't look at them every minute; we check them every day. So if anyone's having a critical failure, we can get out and fix it. But I also tell people that it's a system that sits outside 24/7. It's dependent on the radio towers working, the repeaters working. So it's sort of the third tier system at this point. And because of the multiple points of possible failure, and we have 2 ways. We can activate it via computer server and we can activate it via radio signal. So we maintain multiple locations to be able to do that with us in the comm center. And we actually have an activation unit at our public safety warehouse. I do not guarantee that they'll work. So the residents of the county need to have multiple ways to get their warnings. And so that's making sure that you can receive that alert on your phone is critical. Especially, we generally are getting our first tornado warning by the end of February, last several years. So it's coming up on us pretty quick. And then, of course, I'm not making a climate statement, but the earth is getting warmer. Things are changing. We have snow in Houston. And to your point about salt, I grew up in the South, and literally I have gone in the kitchen, got in the box of Morton's, and put it over the stairs because we don't have salt in the South, not like the bags in my garage here in Ohio. So I think it all ties into people being aware. People need to be paying attention to the change in weather, how it may affect them. I think a prime example was we got the 8 inches of snow. I live right in the middle of East Walnut Hills on a major street, and that was a great barometer because there was enough information about that out that I did not see the usual, I call it, the slippery slide down my hill, because people actually paid attention. And so I think I encourage all residents always pay attention to the weather as we enter severe weather season, which is starting at the end of February these days. You got flooding, you got lightning, you got tornadoes, you got high wind events. They need to be paying attention to those. So we will be providing some data to the board on both the condition of the systems, what's going on around the country, what kind of policies are out there, to have a community conversation.
Yeah, thank you, Jeff, for the question. So I do think it's really important to pull the community into that conversation, because I can think of individuals that are not using their cell phones. They do not have their phones next to them. People that are of a different generation than myself. And so it'll be really important to make sure that we're not dismissing the needs of that group of individuals, and we build these redundancies into the system so that all people are alerted to emergencies. So thanks for being thoughtful about
Yeah, you all have a friend that calls it my siren, right?
That's right. That's right. All right.
They know where their siren is.
All right. Well, thank you very much. Really
Thank you.
appreciate you coming in. The second item the last item on our agenda is an executive session. I'm going to make a motion that we go into executive session pursuant to Ohio Revised Code Section 121.22G1 to consider the employment and compensation of a public employee.
Second. Commissioner Dreehouse?
Yes.
Commissioner Summer Dumas?
Yes.
Commissioner Reese? Yes.